Thank you. We'll get started in just a minute.
Yeah, it should be working. You did the duplicate.
What in the hell does it mean?
Actually, let me make sure it's. Sweet. Technologically advanced.
Oh yeah, I definitely can't see that from here. That's okay. I'm gonna get it in front of me.
Melanie, did you need a copy of the?
I'm like, I'm the same way.
You said you were looking for one.
Thank you.
There you go. That one was pre-kitty edit, so some of the words are scrunched together, but it's the same content.
Okay, there we go. So you said Kevin wasn't gonna be here?
Yeah, he declined this morning.
Huh. Well, that's weird.
We're live in here.
Yeah.
Okay. Sense of content we're talking about.
Right.
Okay. So we will call this May 1st meeting of the Oregon Administrative Rules Committee to order. Let's go ahead and make announcements. Looks like we have a guest online, maybe. So if we want to go ahead and kick it off, Lee.
Lee Tuminello, City of Portland, representing cities greater than 25,000 and the board's secretary.
Great, Andy. Andy? Jamie?
Hi, Jamie Lemke, Northwest Natural, representing natural gas distribution and the board's vice chair.
Thank you. Connor?
Good afternoon, everyone. Connor Tony. I work for Love Incorporated. And I represent excavators.
Alba,
Hi, Alba Vogelin with Clackamas County, and I represent counties.
keep messing around or moving around on my screen. I'm losing track of where I am. Hey, Dale, want to introduce yourself?
Hello, Dale Brummingen, representing Interstate Natural Gas Transportation,
Thank you.
TC Energy.
And it looks like we have a guest. Will you please identify yourself?
Hello, my name is Justin Buchanan. I am the sewer and stormwater locate supervisor for the city of Portland.
Perfect. And in the room with me, Micah, you want to begin?
Micah Brown, I represent Milka.
Melody Lewis, represent regulated electricity. Kitty O'Keefe, executive assistant for the OUNC.
Josh Thomas, Executive Director, OUNC.
And I'm Jessica Epley with Zipley Fiber, representing telecommunications companies with more than 50,000 access lines and the chair of this committee. Okay, thank you, everyone. Previous meeting minutes were in the packet. If you've had an opportunity to review them, I would be happy to entertain a motion to accept the meeting minutes.
I'll motion to accept.
We have a motion from Lee to accept the meeting minutes as presented. Is there a second?
I'll second. This is Connor.
Thank you, Connor. There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
All right.
Any
Aye.
opposed, state the same. Motion passes. Okay, I apologize. Comments from the chair are, you note the agendas are quite long. The goal is for this to become a working document so that we can come prepared to have robust conversation during the meeting. I heard once that Amazon has a standing policy on meeting preparation. There has to be a one-pager for whatever meeting topic is. It is expected that it is read in advance of the meeting. And if you haven't read it when you've gotten to the meeting will be paused so you can read it in front of everybody. And then we'll come back and have a discussion. I'm not going to embarrass anybody because this is, you know, a lengthy document and it is heady, but going forward, that is what I will expect coming into these meetings. We're spending a lot of time preparing documentation so that we can have conversation about the merits of each individual item. So it's really important to me that we show up in our very brief time together and we really focus on making decisions or figuring out what else we need to know. So with that, let's get right into our agenda, beginning with agenda items 2. We have 2 rules that we have approved for rulemaking. So Josh, where are we at on getting ready to get notices published? What do you need from us on that?
The main thing is we wanted to consolidate rule changes that we're bringing forward. And so if there's going to be any other that we are covering either today or in near future meetings that we're going to consolidate with that, we'd want to know that sooner rather than later. But if we're not going to bring any more forward, then we could advance the 2 that we got.
Okay, so
lined up.
what cadence would you be looking for rulemaking? Because that might give us kind of a working target.
Yeah, I think, I don't know if we need to do it in regularity, but I know it takes 90 days to get through the process conservatively. So we just have to reverse engineer that in.
So at this point, if we wanted to do any rulemaking, we really need to have it sort of solidified by August to get it in 23.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, at least, yeah, well, that would still give us some wiggle room. So, yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Not enough with holidays, though. Okay, so we will come back to that.
Okay.
Figure out what our next steps are. I'll add that to the end of the agenda. Working plan. Okay, diving right in. Oh no. My pages got out of order. Just realized that. We're gonna go with it goes there. Okay. Meeting item number 1 is OAR 952-001-0040. This is pre-marking in white paint. We had existing language. And. Oh, that's where that page went, sorry. Now I realize what happened when my printer spit it out. And we have some new proposed language. During our last meeting, we had some discussion on these topics. What is the committee's? Oh, thank you. Please make it bigger.
I'm trying. You can't read that?
No.
Tell me when to stop. That's at 125. That's 150.
I think go to 200 and you should be able to see it. And I'll just cheat and pull it up as a separate
There we go.
document. That's better.
Okay.
Give me just a moment, let me pull it on my screen as well. Okay, so we have proposed language. What would the committee like to do at this juncture?
The proposed language for white paint, the intention and the intent and why this was brought to the committee was because a few of these items weren't. They weren't being helpful, so the being descriptive and having a defined work area on the ticket, listed on the ticket for the marking instructions has always been a hassle. It's always been a challenge. And white paint was something that wasn't being put on the ground for pre-marking. So what we have in our rules, we have a pre-marking requirement. And what's proposed, the proposed language is stating is that we take that away. And then just basically give best practices in our rules as to what you can do, which is you can mark it in white. You can use call center virtual white lining to a certain extent. You can use the instructions, and then it goes in and outlines. So my perspective, I know who put this together. Obviously, we see that Kevin did. When I read it, it looks like a enforcement perspective on how it would read in our rules, meaning that he calls out the quadrants as in front, left, back, rear. Yeah, let's give some clarity to that. But if he's trying to be clear there, see, so let's go back. So the instructions, how I said they're challenging, when somebody says the right side of the property, they may think that that means the rear and the front, right side. And so he wants to bring clarity to that part of it. But what if this is a, 2,000-foot locate down Cedar Hills Boulevard? That's not a property. And so that's the other piece of it that we're not addressing here, in my opinion. I think we've got some best practices in how the industry operates, the standard. And I think we've been doing that. But our whole point is to get something in play where excavators had to put white paint down on their projects to help locators out in the field. Know exactly where and reduce the time spent on unnecessary locating. So none of this tackles that. What this does is it gives us a clear perspective from an enforcement, how to enforce the rule a little bit better. From the instructions of it, is the way I see it.
Well, it's definitely difficult to read. As I went through it, I had to read through it, I don't know how many times just to understand
Right.
it. I'm like, I don't understand this. So if I don't understand it, I know other people. will.
And I understand that, and I don't know if anybody's got their hand up. It looks like Lee's got her hand
It
up.
does.
I'll just say one last thing, and that's the reason that we're here. We have different stakeholderships, so everyone has to weigh in, and I think that we've got a decent start here, but I think we're going backwards. I think we add his piece for the quadrants to make it a little bit clear. Like you said, that was tough to read. That was tough for me to read too, until I got towards the end, and only working in the industry was I able to, understand that.
Right.
So unless you're an excavator, you're not going to understand or get that. And maybe even some excavators may not understand it either. So maybe some clarity to that, but the rest of it is just industry standard, best practices. So,
Okay, so your recommendation is the content in subset 2 is what would be retained.
right, and with clarity.
Okay, Lee. Let's go.
I brought Justin today because he had expressed interest in providing testimonial regarding white paint, and forgive my ignorance, but when would be a good time for him to speak to this subject?
This is a free form discussion, so Justin, please. Let's hear what your thoughts are.
Hello, thank you for having me. Yeah, I'm here to advocate for the rule change to require pre-marking. And so the Common Ground Alliance best practices are, regarded as a trusted resource for underground damage prevention. And pre-marking is included in the CGA's best practices, chapter 5.2. And pre-marking is something that multiple other states already require. Pre-marking helps avoid confusion, delays, errors, and that's the physical delineation of the outside boundaries of an excavation. Pre-marking is mutually beneficial to excavators and locators. So without pre-marking, locators might not locate the entire excavation area, or they might waste time locating excessively. And the excavator might waste time calling facility owners back to relocate something that was missed. Pre-marking will also be beneficial for off-street open areas like schools, airports, large natural areas where pinpointing the excavation site can be difficult in some of those. And requiring pre-marking will result in more efficient ticket management for facility owners. And that can also translate to locates taking place earlier in the 2 business day window because of the efficiencies, and that would be benefit to excavators as well. Pre-marking may help avoid translation errors between excavators and one call center staff, especially property owners who aren't professional excavators. And then the last thing is physically white lining is more effective than the electronic white lining. And the ITIC polygons accuracy can vary widely. So that's all I have, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Justin. I appreciate the feedback. Josh, I think you have something on the score of electronic white lining and some information we've received from One Call Concepts.
Yeah, we've had a lot of questions about this in our trainings about why we aren't using electronic or virtual digital white lining, whatever you want to call it. And the standard response I had heard in the past was that the ITIC NXT system wasn't accurate enough, and then that was one of the reasons why. But I asked Scott about that, and they came back and said it is accurate enough that they do feel with certainty that it could be used for that purpose. He said they use NAD 83 GPS coordinates, which are very accurate. System could be ideal for virtual white lining and is currently being used to identify the boundaries of excavation. They could set a buffer if we felt like there was some variation to the accuracy, like say if there was a 3-foot inaccuracy, you could put in a 3-foot buffer, but he didn't think that was necessary. And then he said as long as people are if they're using coordinate points, that they would need to use NAD 83 GPS coordinates so that they're apples to apples. But otherwise, I asked if other states have mandatory white lining are using ITIC NXT, and the only of the states where pre-marking is required, only Louisiana has electronic white lining and physical if they don't use next gen, an older version of NXT. And then Kitty's pulled some information from CGA as well that Justin just referred to. And we're getting some information from Minnesota, Wyoming, and Northern California that have had some success with electronic white lining.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay,
That is not committed yet.
so I want to take a quick pulse of the committee, because what I'm hearing today is we don't like where this language is headed. If there is an opposing position to that, and I'm looking at the folks in the room and on the phone, I'd like to hear it now. Okay, so we're in alignment that this proposed language isn't gonna work for us. So we need to go back to what we had before, because we had two forms of proposed language. Kitty, do you happen to have that document still, or Josh, do you have it? It was from the last agenda. We could take a look at that and maybe draw some sort of a conclusion here. You know, I appreciate the interest in aligning our rules to best practices. But policy best practices are not administrative rules.
Right.
And that is in fact what we are doing here. So I wouldn't, you know, I don't want to belabor the point, but somebody who failed to meet the obligations of these words, I have no idea how they would ever be penalized, because there's so much interpretation here. You would never ever find somebody with an attributable fault subject to enforcement.
Right. And
There's almost no enforceability here.
and over the years, we've pretty much moved these rules in the direction that they can be enforceable easily, and there's less gray area, so.
The committee at the last meeting said that we didn't like the language, so we went here and now we'll look at something different.
So Jessica, I pulled up the last agenda.
Beautiful, thank you.
And then whose proposed language was that?
There's two.
Kevin Hennessy. Yeah, there were two sets of proposals.
Mhm.
Will you scroll down, Kitty?
Actually, three.
It's 040.
It was.
There's one. There we go.
Right.
So we have the existing language proposed and alternative proposed.
Right, and then we have Kevin's.
Yeah. So you now have three versions of the language. We will refer to the two on the screen as proposed, additional proposed, and CGA. CGA is what is in the current agenda. So I'd like to hear the committee's thoughts on the two proposals on screen right now, proposed and alternative proposed.
Lee has her hand raised.
Lee,
Jessica, I'm in favor of the alternative proposed language. It seems pretty plain. My only question would be is, can you or someone else maybe speak to how does this deviate from the best practice?
it's about a tenth of as long.
It doesn't. It doesn't. We just basically, I think what, and I'm not gonna speak for Kevin, but I think what Kevin was trying to do was cover all bases. So he wanted the instructions in there, he wanted the white paint option, all forms of delineating the area. And we don't need, we already have a standard, you know, that we use currently, and we have it in half the space on our, in our standards manual or on rule, so, I really, for me, Lee, that answer your question? Do you have anything else?
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you.
Micah, do you have thoughts you want to share?
No, I just wanted to say that I think this is the first time I'm hearing from OCC about how the virtual white lining can apply and how we can use it in rule and how it's being tested, or if it's successful elsewhere. So if it's successful, and they can guarantee it, I mean, and then like you said, that's something I never thought about, is given a buffer, because a buffer would allow for that error. And that could actually be in rule. But I think that is the route we would likely need to take, because the opposing sides here are the work that it's going to put on excavators that are, you know, that are the bigger, can be, I wish. he was here. But can be, you know, the K&Es, the Knife Rivers, those that are that have multiple projects going, and they're constantly having to update the tickets. And so refreshing white paint, putting the white paint out there, making sure it's not conflicting with others on a project like that, that'd be tough. So I understand that side of it. So if we can have that virtual white paint element and it be viable, I think that's where we go. And
So
that's only one sentence.
So
Okay.
you're just talking white paint on the ground or virtual white
Right.
paint. That's it.
Right.
And Lee is making a recommendation that in the alternative of white paint, that stakes could be used. With the stakes.
Well, okay.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, that's actually in the definition. So when you go to the definition for Mark, he may tell you what we can do.
Okay, well, we got lots of hands up here. I thought I saw Dale's hand up, but now I don't see Dale's hand up. I see Andy's
No.
stuff.
You
Oh,
did,
oh.
but Mike had answered it a little bit anyway, and stuff, but, you know, I was more concerned with the bigger projects like Micah, had mentioned is, I guess an example is like a power company right away or a pipeline right away is you're going for miles, and that would be great in a virtual instance where, hey, virtually or however I'm gonna mark those 10 miles. Yeah, I'm not gonna paint 10 miles of, you know, pre-work. That's where I'd advocate for that virtual deal, but I think you also open yourself up to a contractor or a overdoing it, like I'm just gonna cover this whole block and be done with it. You know what I mean? And open yourself up to maybe too much white paint on the ground virtually.
Well, I guess it's a decision of how many rattle cans you got in your truck that day. Andy,
Yeah, I think I'd be in favor of the alternative proposed language as well. I mean, if we were going to change something, making it simple for homeowners to understand and to make sure that they get their marks down as well, in smaller agencies. But yeah, I think simple is better.
thank you. Jamie,
Yeah, I think that, so I'm in favor of the alternative proposed as well. I think that we should have the virtual or electronic white lining option for more than even just large projects. I think that that's just where the industry is going with technology, and that should it should definitely just be an option. And to Dale's point, you may get people that overdo it. And I think that that's kind of part of the growing pains of that process. I think there definitely will be that. Somebody that covers a whole block for one small piece of property within that, block. But I think that those are, hopefully we'll be able to weed those out as people get more used to the technology component of it.
Okay, so with the virtual white lining, they need the coordinates. What coordinates were they
Well,
again?
Coordinates or polygon, but the problem with that is homeowners can only use ITIC light, which basically is their property, but they can't specify like you can as a contractor or professional excavator. So that would be limiting on that part. Homeowners would not be able to virtual white line as it stands.
so, but if you have the option or, right, so
Yes.
that, I think the language, and Connor, I see your hand, I'm gonna get to you in just a second. In the alternative proposed language, at the end of the first sentence to say, or virtual white paint, right? If we added that phrase there, now we capture, we give the option, right?
I think we have to call it electronic. I think there's a trademark on virtual, but
Okay,
that's
electronic white paint.
just
Yep,
wordsmithing.
yep, that's, Connor,
Yeah, you kind of just brought up what Jamie was saying as well. I think there needs to be an option to have the virtual or electronic and push contractors. I brought this up, a couple of friends of mine that are contractors, and the electronic, I feel like we should just definitely push that route because we're trying to bring everybody up with the technology. I feel like that's fair. And if there is a buffer and better results, better information, I would like to see that report regarding the NXT and the virtual white lining. I think that'd be great. But I think if there was an option there, I don't think there'd be a lot of pushback.
do you want to push that email out to the committee?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I would like to understand for sure, like when you do virtual white lining, what you're seeing and if it's actually correct, because
Mhm.
Then the question becomes whether or not you need to add a buffer.
I think
Yeah.
I think it would be best to have them attend the next meeting when we go over this.
Yeah,
I would also like an opportunity to draft language. So here's my thought. We need to remove this. The stake, the wooden stake,
Mhm.
that needs to be removed. Flags are sufficient. If we're asking locators to now start pounding in large stakes in the ground, then who's gonna locate for them? So, or just the work that it takes to do it.
But if you're a homeowner, you don't have flags, you have wooden stakes.
Well,
We need to provide for both. I mean, I can go pick up a pack of steaks at Home Depot for $1.50.
right. Right, but I mean, to me, that's asking a lot. I think if there's any method of identifying it with something, I think we could, yeah.
Well, we can definitely hear from One Call Concepts. We can definitely spend more time on this language, or we can decide to tool this language today and have One Call Concepts come to the board meeting where we ask for consideration, where they can present this, so the whole board can hear it and it's read into that record before that decision is made. Would that be okay, Madam Chair? Just trying to keep the process moving forward.
So as a homeowner, like us as homeowners, what would you expect? Like if you get on there and you go to submit a ticket, what would you expect?
I did this recently.
Did
I did
you?
this exact thing.
Okay.
It was really fun because what happened was not what I expected. I went in, having a little excavation. I'm changing the grade of my property by 7 feet in one corner. It's a pretty
Wow.
large area, but
Yep.
it's, for some reason, they decided to push a bunch of dirt behind a retaining wall. I can't explain it. These people were weird that lived there before. We're gonna fix it and make that 1,000 square feet, which is how much space is currently up 7 feet, usable in my backyard. So I got on the little website, very excited, went into the homeowner side, pulled up my address and tried to specify the northeast corner of my property as it goes along Juliet Terrace. So I drew my little box and then locates came out and they were everywhere but where I wanted them. And I couldn't explain it. Like I had some locates that went way out into the middle of the street. We are not going to be anywhere near the middle of the street. I'm not disturbing any of that. So I have no idea. Out on Bull Mountain Road, there were locates placed out there. None of those were within my project area. The few that were within the project area were very unclear in the way that they were marked, which led to follow-up calls with the utilities. So, you know, when we go to do this excavation, I'm gonna be out there where we actually have to stake because we have to deal with the Northwest Natural funny business. And so I have to do some staking for them. That's different than what I have to do for my excavator.
Mhm.
So we will stake it out. Flags, white paint. It doesn't matter. It just is some way to mark the area.
Right, but so you know about this. I mean, you know the process, you know what's supposed to
Right.
happen. And you had issues with it. So, you know, I go back and I think about those homeowners that. Yeah.
So just, and Megan's got her hand up on it.
Thank you, Micah. Yes, Megan. You're
muted.
off mute, but your hand is up. And now you've disappeared.
Okay, my hand, I'll take the hand.
Oh.
Okay, so if we're looking at the language currently, as far as what we have in the definition, for looking at it, response. Mark or identify, notify the excavator that they're unlocatable. Okay, so now we need to go to. Okay, mark or marking means an indication from the use of stakes, paint, or other clearly identified material. Now, this relates to marking facilities themselves. This isn't a homeowner or an excavator. So this is what I propose. If we look at the existing language is good and it's solid language. So as an exception, it says except as provided in section 2. So what we would do is we would put a homeowner as an exception. So that would be A. Or 2, and then we bump the existing 2 to 3, or however you want to do it, but we would make a homeowner the exception. Then after that, we would add an element, let's see what we got here, so C, as being electronic, virtual or electronic white lining. So you have 3 options. Clearly identify it within the ticket. You delineate it by white paint. Or you have the virtual or the electronic piece. So there's 3 options that an excavator has.
I think we should get rid of,
Or do we take virtual
You would put it up in the.
automatic and then those
Right.
2 as options?
Right, you
Okay.
would put that in one. You would put, so where it says an excavator must pre-mark in the color white or electronic
Right,
white
Okay.
paint is where you would place it, if you're
Right.
gonna keep that.
right. Do we have that not on a PDF somewhere on a Word doc?
Yeah. We do. So then are you suggesting that the language in sub 2 change?
So.
Josh?
Okay, so.
You have it in, let me go pull my last agenda.
I think okay, so I think that's right. I don't think we add anything here because what we're looking at is we need to make virtual or, I'm sorry, electronic white lined a mandatory thing for excavators. Or they mark it in white paint. And is there going to be an exception to marking in white paint? That's our question. So right here, we don't change anything. There is an exception for unable to mark it in white paint.
what would be the exception?
Right now, it says an operator
Instructions.
can determine precisely the direction, length, and location of the proposed excavation by referring to a locate ticket. Or before beginning the proposed project, the excavator and the operator met at the construction site to exchange information required in section 1 of this rule.
So wasn't that a huge issue for you locating where the instructions?
Right.
My personal feeling is to get rid of the instructions. And they either have to virtual white line. Or they have to mark it. And that's it. Or they meet, of course.
I think, yeah.
So if they meet, so you're proposing to retain 2B, to eliminate 2A. And to change the language in 1, the color white or electronic white paint, or however we need to refer to that, so that
Right,
it
so
makes sense.
up there in
That's
1,
exactly-
that's exactly right. So we'd be
Okay.
getting rid of A, B would move to A, and then we'd add C for homeowner.
Yeah, we can do it. Yeah, we have to do something with the homeowners.
Correct, we have to exclude them, and this is a discussion we had before about separating the 2 if we're requiring this type of,
Okay, so in the proposed language for homeowners previously. We didn't deal directly with this issue, so what do we want to say for homeowners as an exception? And please, folks on the phone, join in our conversation. I know it's not as much fun because you're not in the room, but
we're gonna
we'd
have.
love to hear your voices.
I think, yeah, right, and just cut in, so, or raise your hand, but homeowner, we don't have as a definition. Do we need to define that? But I think for this rule, you would definitely need to.
I was thinking the same thing, because let's say there is an excavator that was doing work for the homeowner, who's gonna call in, homeowner excavator? And what rule are they gonna use? I mean, what, are they gonna be excluded because they're a homeowner?
Well, I think professional excavators are defined by rule, right?
Excavator,
Yeah, so that's, I
No.
mean,
excavator means any person who engages in excavation
well, then technically a homeowner is an excavator.
Uh-huh.
in that context.
So a non-professional excavator, which I guess we would define as somebody who doesn't have a license bonded and it's insured, right? So,
And
Or-
how are we going to
Or
justify
you give
that?
the loophole where you put it as how you submit the ticket. So are you submitting it as a homeowner or an excavator? So can an excavator downgrade and, you know, and say, hey.
That's
I'm just gonna
exactly.
use-
But
what I
that-
was getting
Yeah.
at.
That makes us beholden to the system of one call concepts, because that's the way they're set up. I don't know that
But
all,
under contract, it states that they have to provide,
but that's a
whatever we want them
contract
to
with
provide.
a vendor.
right?
If we choose a different vendor, is their system the same? Are we setting up a rule that then we have to change because we change a contract in the future? Like that's,
We didn't have the options, but that was in the RFP that they had to.
okay. All right.
I'm just saying.
I know, and we're trying to get to a, you know, if you're not somebody who does this professionally for a living, why would we give them an exception?
One reason would be enforceability. I know Scott said because one of the questions at Lane UCC was, can we put a check mark if they're submitting a ticket request or when they call that says they're committing to market with white paint, or that they agree to market with white paint after they've made the request. And he said we could, technically speaking, but they wouldn't decline the request if they hadn't checked it, or if they can't, because otherwise they know that the excavator is going to proceed with the project with or without marks at that point, and there's more of a danger to not marking the site than to requiring white paint and then not having them get it marked at all.
I see, we have an expert on the line, so thank you for that, Kitty. Scott, we're having some internal discussion here about how we might create an exception around white line for homeowners. Can you give us some insight as to things we might want to consider from one call concepts perspective?
There you go. So
Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you.
Oh, good, good. I don't know that One Call Concepts would have a perspective on it. We, you know, we can work into the system whatever you want. Certainly they do select homeowner if they're homeowners, so we could not read them that field or not. We currently read that field to all homeowners. The current law is that they have to either white mark or give a clear enough description to accommodate that. I think that's good verbiage. If you're asking, but that would have been my opinion in the past, that the verbiage that allows you to, you know, give an accurate description is good, and that kind of accommodates most of what a homeowner would do. You could potentially limit it to parcel. So if you have a specific address, white lining wouldn't be required at that point, and that would again capture most home operations.
Right,
And it's clear by nature.
so if it was a single, if you were requesting to locate on a single parcel, that's an exception to the rule. Well,
Just for homeowners.
where you got hands now.
oh. I was thinking about a very large excavation, like a pool dig. Okay, Megan. Are you with
Can you
us?
hear me?
We can hear you. Speak,
Oh,
please.
yay. Do we have to provide an exception for homeowners? Because I feel like that would be a big out for a lot of people. Like in your case, I mean, I don't know what you had down on the ground, but had you had an identifiable dig area or say something like that rather than the stake, but not just specifically exclude homeowners and give them the opportunity not to do it? Because I think more people would tend to draft that way than put in additional effort to marking the area.
Yeah, my concern is that we're gonna create delay in the excavation world because homeowners won't have done this.
Or they're gonna pick up the phone and call and inundate the one call with their stuff.
Right. Jamie,
I was just gonna speak to Scott's point about a parcel. I feel like that would capture a lot of homeowners or occupants in that type of work. So maybe it's not a homeowner exemption, it's if you're digging it within a specific parcel, And then, to Scott's point, just by nature, that's a very clear delineation of where the work is going to occur. Because then it otherwise gets so messy with, changing the definition of who an excavator is and all that.
Maybe tie it to the 750.
You have to be careful with the word parcel, because whereas I live currently on a 50 by 100 foot parcel, I used to live on 20 acres.
Right,
Right.
so if you go to 750 feet, now all of a sudden, I mean, like, me and my 6 neighbors would not qualify for needing to do electric or white paint. So that's,
But we're, right, but we're targeting projects. We're not targeting, those smaller areas. So if we did tie it to our rule of 750 feet, then.
but that's large area.
So this would be, you're required to provide virtual and white or white paint. If you're over in the project or large area, you have to provide that. If you're not, that would be the exception.
I would disagree with going to a large area definition for this, because you're not gonna capture a lot of, I think about where we lay fiber. Those are smaller areas.
The not the fiber, the parcel item as well, being a locator, you want to know if you're going to be in the backyard or the front yard. Because if you are in the backyard and they have dogs and you have to get in and maybe their gate's locked or whatever, that causes an issue. And if it's just in the front yard, then you're all right. So my personal feeling is the parcel, I don't think.
Well, that's the thing. So let's say you put that square
Okay,
with all the GPS in the back. On the tickets, you're virtually doing it. That's where you want it. It's automatically going to give the instructions for that area on the ticket, the locator to read it. Whether you fall within the exception or outside of the exception, the locator is going to know exactly where they need to go. And if it's an exception, you don't have to break out stakes, white paint, anything like that. You just give it a brief, small description on there, whether you're calling it in or whether you're doing it virtually, or whether you're putting it in white paint. The locator is going to know where to go. If we did tie it to large project or large area, for me, that's the only way that if we sat here with all of our stakeholders, that we'd actually be able to get this thing to push.
Well, hold on. At least in Washington County, you're gonna have to go get a permit. You're gonna have to have a site plan. So maybe a site plan for a homeowner is an alternative to these things. Is depending on the size of the project, you're either gonna have a site plan or you're gonna have something that you used to explain your project to the permitting agency. Now, I recognize Washington County is probably one of the hardest counties to do anything as a homeowner in, but that might be an alternative that speaks to what a homeowner is gonna be doing that gives that same information, right? Rather than giving the exemption to the parcel, they can provide a site plan for the project and the proposed excavation.
So the piece that I kind of like about this is that, let's say we're putting we're building fiber, we're running, main line down 2 miles. So this would fall, it would not be the exception because it's over 750 feet. So now they have to virtually put it on there or put it in white paint. And they have to maintain that for well, if we do the 28 days, but currently for the 45 days, they have to maintain that white paint, recall a ticket, redo the white paint or virtual in this situation. Now, for those individuals, it says, if we take this language, in the event the white paint or stakes are not present, the locate request is considered null and void. So I think for those larger projects, if we had something in there like along that line, then that would help. Because if they don't have delineation, when you go out there as a locator and the locate request says mark 8 miles. And the locator knows that there are areas where there's no utilities along this area and there's overhead and underground thing. So it's. Yeah, I like that piece to be in there and added, and I don't know how much time we have there. So
We're gonna keep beating on this one till we're done, and then we'll take stuff to the next meeting if we need to.
Okay.
It's the whole idea of this. So, okay, you've added new wrinkles.
Sorry.
Hold on to your wrinkle there for a moment. Let's go back to this notion of, is it white paint electronic white paint or site plan?
How many people are gonna have a site plan to do,
Right.
trees?
They're technically supposed to. I mean, I'm just, reciting what
Every county is gonna be different.
every county's gonna be, yes, but the building codes are pretty specific about what you have to do to meet different, there's state statutes that we're adhering to here. There are county procedural requirements that are different. And a site plan is easy. Like you take out your little piece of paper, here's my property, here's what I'm doing in this, I mean, it's fine.
Because I've never even experienced, that sounds like a homeowner association deal.
I was just wondering,
Because I-
this,
Paid $4,000 for full engineering of this
Really?
corner excavation, yes.
so what does Scott have to say about that? I mean, how can the
Can they
home-
ingest it?
Yeah,
Scott?
How can they ingest the
A
site?
plan. Yep.
I mean, you can submit attachments to a locate request, which is how it gets out. Which is, kind of the idea of electronic white lining as well. If they did it through the system, you just access your ticket online and then be able to view either your electronic white lining or your or a site plan if that's the route you wanted to go. I think if you're trying to get to homeowners, though, still things like site plans and large areas are just not gonna, it's not gonna fit in. You'd want, I'm thinking of, I remember an experience I had when I was at Northwest Natural where a big complaint came out that we didn't mark in white because we called in like the entire lot of a building downtown in the area in front of it, when all we really needed was a 4x4 cut across the street because we were cutting off a building. And so I think you want to capture that white line requirement for professional excavators. That's just my 2 cents.
so if a site plan does get submitted, how does that get out to the locators?
It's available as an attachment on the locate ticket.
It shows on there.
Does it,
Yes.
your company,
Your former employer?
Yes,
And yes, USIC and Located Inc. and I believe BLM, I believe they all have a link where you just click on it and it takes you to it.
okay, so, we do locates within our company as well. I don't know if we've ever gotten a link, so that would be something to
It's on the
consider.
ticket.
Okay,
It's on the ticket.
Dale, I see you.
It's like, on the reformat of the ticket,
mhm.
it's on there. Okay. So
You're
now,
still on mute.
do they have the ability to click it?
Who, me?
Yeah, there you go.
But if they can call it like mine, guys.
I wanted to go back a little bit further when you're talking about exemptions for landowners.
Sure.
And some of the implications that may come from that, from a pipeline right away where that pipeline doesn't own the land, they have an easement to go through a property, so that landowner will say, it's my property and I have an exemption to doing a one call. And you may run into a number of problems doing it. And in my past history, working as an emergency responder for distribution gas years ago, 90% of our calls were landowners that hadn't done a one call over the weekends and stuff. So just being careful with the property and who's actually, thinking that, making sure we understand the easements, you have it right away, but there is an easement and it's still that landowner's property.
They still have an obligation to get their locates.
Mhm.
I do believe, yeah, Megan.
Megan, do you have a question, comment?
I'm gonna say, won't say firmly against, but I really am really hesitant to add anything about the large area in this particular section of the language. I do like the site plan as an alternative option for homeowners. I think you're giving them 3 very valid, easily accomplished options. They can mark it in white, they can give you a sign, or they can go online and do it in white. And I think any homeowner should be able to accomplish any of those things.
Thank you, Megan, and thank you, Jamie.
So I did briefly mention earlier why we're changing this rule, because the rule as it sits is a good rule. But why are we changing it? The point was unnecessary marking of utilities that don't need to be located. That's being billed to the utility companies if they have a contract.
Right.
The locators are spending far more time out there, so they're not meeting on-time completion. They're not meeting on-time performance. That means that the 2 days that we give them, they don't have the time to do it now because they're spending all this time on these large projects that aren't delineated. So it is really centered around the locators. And so my voice was very, I would say what hurts the locators. It's not so much if they go to a residential area, let's say they have to mark the entire property, big deal. Unless it's 8 acres, but generally on 8 acres, there's only about there's maybe primary for power that goes up to a transformer, feeds the house in a barn, or telephone line that runs up there. So minimal utilities. Yeah, it's a pain to have all that distance, but minimal. We're talking about the locators here and how it affects the locators. So I think we're getting off track, and I understand what you're saying, Megan, but I just think it's for a smaller project, requiring them to do the same thing as these, franchise or these large companies. From a locator standpoint, I don't see the reason behind it, because meeting on time completion is important because it's a constant battle for that.
Right.
And what we're trying to do here is trying to help that situation. All I'm saying is giving an exception to homeowners and smaller projects, and it's not ending. I mean, we're requiring homeowners to now mark in white paint or, do virtual when they maybe just want to put flowers in. And so, I mean, that's the, yeah. So you're capturing with the large project language, because we are redefining large project or large area. We're getting rid of this. We've already voted on that.
Mhm.
And we put 750 feet in there. So if we attach that part of it, then we're capturing exactly what's hurting the locators and hurting our on-time performance, I think.
Okay, Jim Walton, looks like you've joined us. Thank you for coming to our committee meeting. You've got some comments?
Yeah, real quick question, and I'm kind of a fan of what Scott and Jamie were talking about as far as if it's a single parcel, not necessarily having to have the white paint on the ground, but as far as the private homeowners and trying to get locate tickets done timely and not jam those guys up too much, I'm going to share with you what in this case be the state of Washington does on this stuff. They have an exemption for an excavation of less than 12 inches in depth on private non-commercial property. So they're going after the homeowners, trying to lower the amount of tickets out there. As long as you're not digging, your excavation is less than 12 inches in depth on private non-commercial property, if the excavation is performed by the person or an employee, not a contractor, of the person who owns or occupies the property on which the excavation is being performed. That'll take care of your folks putting in the plants and what have you at the busy time of year as we come up upon that. That should drop the amount of tickets down if you let the homeowners doing those excavations less than 12 inches deep on their property. But it has to be them. If they're hiring a landscaper, professional excavation person, that person has to call in that ticket.
Okay, so real quick, thanks for that. And I'm familiar with it to a certain extent. Now, with that, is this legislative? Is this statute? I think that's what that is, right? I mean, this is
That's statutory.
That's statutory, right?
Correct.
How far back did that get passed? Do you know?
Hold on, I'll get you the history. Just a minute, trying to pull it up. For those of you who want to do a little quick Googling, it's RCW 19-122.
.031.
Thank you.
And
I was
just to save some
about
time,
there.
Oregon already has that exemption as well.
Yes, but it's not the same.
So
I
this
could read you
is,
hours.
1B, the requirements of RCW 19-122-030 does not apply to any of the following activities. A is the emergency excavation. B is an excavation of less than 12 inches in depth on private non-commercial property. If the excavation is performed by the person or an employee of the person who owns or occupies the property on which the excavation is being performed. C, the tilling of soil for agricultural purposes less than 12 inches in depth within a utility easement, 20 inches in depth outside of a utility easement. The replacement of an official traffic sign installed prior to January 1st, 2013, no deeper than the depth at which it was installed. Road maintenance activities involving excavation of less than 6 inches in depth below the original road grade, and maintenance activities involving excavation less than 6 inches in depth below the original ditch flow line, or alteration of the original ditch horizontal alignment. F, the creation of bar holes less than 20 inches in depth or of a depth during emergency leak investigations, provided that the excavator takes reasonable measures to eliminate electrical arc hazards or construction, operation, or maintenance activities by an irrigation district on rights of way easement. We're not doing that. Easements or facilities owned by the Federal Bureau of Reclamation and federal reclamation projects. Any activity described in section 1 of this section is subject to the requirements specified in RCW 19-122-050. The effective date was 2011.
Okay. So, and Scott, what I meant by that is that our rule, it defines excavation, right? But then in our rule under 952-001-50, the excavator to give notice for proposed work exemption, it is the notice requirement of this section, which is to give full 2 business days. The notice requirement of this section does not apply if the excavator is in response to an emergency, or if all of the following apply, not as that stated, where if you are, these are the exceptions. So this is all of it, and that is a tenant or owner of a private property, the excavation is on private property of that owner or tenant, the excavation is less than 12 inches in depth. I mean, it has to be all of these things, and it's really targeting the gas distribution or transmission pipeline that's running through a lot of the agricultural areas. That's why that was put in there, I'm assuming.
So here's my thought. We want to make this simple. Homeowners are not going to read the standards manual. So while it may be redundant to our rule to incorporate some of this language at different points in the rule, I think it makes the usability of the rules greater for our target audience. So I think I'd like to go around. We have a couple of suggestions on the table, but we'll take them in order as best I can recall. I think the first suggestion we've heard is to amend the existing language sub 1 after the word white in line 2, pre-mark with the color white, or electronic white paint. So I'd like to hear whether anyone would object to making that addition, and if so, that's great. Let's have a conversation about it, but I want to get down to the finer points of the language.
I like that change.
Thank you, Con. Okay, so we know we're gonna do that. Thank God, we got some bit of progress here. Now, the second change, in that same line, would now read pre-mark with the color white paint or electronic white paint or a site plan. Are there any objections to including the phrase site plan, which is going to provide more detail to the ticket, which maybe will help to eliminate some of the unnecessary locates that are being called in?
So can you reread that?
Yeah.
Those are the exceptions, correct?
I'm going to read the sentences as we're now considering it. Except as provided in section 2 of this rule, prior to notifying the Oregon Utility Notification Center, an excavator must pre-mark with the color white or electronic white paint or site plan or provide a site plan. The immediate area of the proposed excavation within both the public rights of way and underground easements.
I like that.
Okay,
I would have a wordsmith and readability suggestion, but I think
Please.
the concept is there.
let's,
It's kind of in the middle of it, so I would say an excavator must identify the immediate area, and then at the end say this can be accomplished through marking with white paint, electronic white lining, or through identification in a site plan.
okay,
White line.
Just so it's not sandwiched in the middle of the sentence.
let's capture that again and excavate, hold on, I'm just gonna type it, because I can type faster than I can write. Which is a sad state of life, but true.
There it goes now.
Okay,
Shockingly not for you.
an excavator.
I know.
Must identify the, and then the whole rest of that sentence, and then this can be accomplished through.
Must identify
Interesting.
We talked to this.
the, yeah, talk to text, and then you can tell they're doing it, area
Yeah.
of the proposed, or they use Chat GPT.
It's what
Which
all the
is-
kids are using for papers now. It's surprisingly powerful.
If it makes them sound smarter, I'm all for it. Sorry, both the public rights of way. You all want to be at this meeting in person in the future.
There's enough room,
We got snacks and drinks and
power.
We're the phone company, not the power company. Give me a break. This may be accomplished by. Wow, I could like. See. By. Pre-mark. With the color white. Do we want to use the word paint?
white line.
What else would we allow?
Chalk?
I don't think so.
Well, I think we want, I mean,
Read it one.
I'm trying to get to clarity. I think paint is an operative word there.
Yes, I think
White
so.
paint?
White marking.
Well, what do we have throughout the rest of it?
Marking.
White.
It's, we don't have a definition for paint. We have a definition for marking.
Okay, electronic white paint or white marking.
Right.
Or providing a site plan.
Which could be the
Can
same.
we, can we throw the word identifiable white marking? Or something to,
What's your problem you're trying to solve, Megan?
I'm just thinking as a homeowner, I would want some, like, I'm not sure. I just was trying to get them to have like an outlet for like, this needs to be something that is visible to everyone. The white marking is visible, not tucked in under your side of your retaining wall. I'm assuming most people would understand that. Again, they're probably not going to read the standard,
This
but
comes back to providing stakes is an important thing.
But also
Excellent
you can
flags.
take a string,
Right.
a white string, and mark out your proposed areas.
But that would be with stakes. Stakes and strings.
Okay.
So do we want to add stakes and strings?
Whiskers.
No, I'm just.
we had somebody do upside down white buckets. I mean, it worked. We knew what they wanted. They put 4 buckets out.
We've got to go back to our definition, and it says means an indication from the use of stakes, paint, or other clearly identifiable materials. So I mean, in our
So
definition,
That covers it.
White marking. Okay, just gotta make sure that they know to go back and look at what marking means.
Yeah,
hey,
you know,
Well,
put it.
maybe-
italics
Marking
and say
as
marking.
defined where? White marking, you know what? That's what we're.
I think that's a good.
I think
What's the reference, OAR what? Give me the
For the
full
definition.
952 for definitions of marking.
952.001. The definitions of marking will be 12, so it'll be 952.001.0010.
Sub 12?
12.
Okay. Okay, I'm gonna read it all from start to finish. I know we're all waiting with bated breath. An excavator must identify the immediate area of the proposed excavation within both the public rights of way and underground easement. This may be accomplished by pre-mark with the color white marking as defined at OAR 952.001.0010 sub 12, electronic white marking, or providing a site plan.
Did we say must, shall? Is there any?
Must. We
It has to be
musted it.
must. Shall is out and it doesn't,
You must.
so this right here has the shall and the must is what's at the Secretary of State. So that's the difference. When we did this, that's, I think, or was that in the last? Did we get it in this one?
There's must
thought
in
that
here,
was-
that's why I was.
It
Okay,
says
so
we
we-
retained must.
Okay, so yeah, we made the change and made sure it was in this one. It wasn't in the last one.
Okay, so we're good with that language, right? Show of thumbs, people on the phone, looking for thumbs, okay. Okay, now we're gonna deal with the exception paragraph, sub 2. An excavator need not pre-mark as required in subsection 1 of this rule if. And it sounds like we want to eliminate A and retain B. Is that true?
Yes. Thumb up for me.
So, okay.
This was
So
your
they have-
suggestion,
No,
man.
no,
You got a
no.
problem with it. Tell me what it is.
So pre-mark white or virtual white line
Yeah.
or site plan. Exception would be to meet at the site.
No exception for anyone else.
Right.
I'm all for it. I'm all for it. But I think that there's some things there, but I've made my case and I like where we're headed. Heck,
I would like to
this
hear
is pretty
somebody on the
bold.
phone's opinion. Anyone?
Jim Walton got his hand up.
Jim, please.
Where did we fall on Scott and Jamie's discussion regarding a single parcel?
They can provide
far
a
as-
site,
Well, there's no
What's that?
exceptions,
they can provide a site plan.
right? That was when we were talking about exceptions, Jim, unless you wanna.
I'm sorry, maybe I mistook us. I thought we were talking about exceptions here.
We are now. But there was not consensus on the committee of giving a homeowner an exception of any form, because that could run afoul of our intent to protect underground facilities. So our alternative is to have the homeowner provide a site plan in lieu of
Okay.
marking.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think that's good.
Anyone else on the phone?
Won't piss people off.
Yes.
Well, that's what I'm here to do, apparently.
Well,
Okay.
I'll bet he's gonna have an issue, because.
Okay, we'll hold that for next time. We'll talk about that later. Okay, let's get on to the second item of our agenda now. We've adjudicated that. Oh, I probably should say, now that we've made these recommended changes, we need to recommend these to the board. So I will entertain a motion to recommend the language as, I'm gonna give it to Kitty for the minutes, to the board of directors for approval. Don't all talk at once. Somebody give me a motion.
So moved.
Thank you, Micah. Is there a second?
Second by
Second.
Alba.
Alba, thank you. We have a motion and a second to move the language for OAR 952.001.0040 to the Board of Directors for consideration for rulemaking. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please state the same. Motion passes. Okay. Thank you for that. That was riveting. All right, 0080. This is dealing with amending the rule to provide design information for review. I have no idea why we still are having issues with this, but we needed to have more conversation about this. So in our last meeting, we discussed the need to have the ability to provide copies of the best reasonably available records by electronic message, mail, facsimile, or other delivery method, which we ripped out of the revised Code of Washington. You see that reference there. The alternative proposed language is to remove the words locatable and unlocatable. So I'd like to hear, where's the committee at on this? Are we looking at proposed language or alternative proposed language? Micah, you don't get to go first. Andy, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
I'm sure you would. Unfortunately, I don't really have much on this. I wasn't able to review the documents before the meeting. I didn't have access to them. It was denying me access. So kind of cruising through with everyone. And I heard you say that I was going to have to read it all at some point. So once I get those documents, I could just read it to everybody.
Someone who read the briefs, please. No? He did. Connor, you got thoughts?
I think I heard my name, but I can't really hear you. You guys are cutting in and out.
Because Mike is having sidebar conversations over here.
Oh.
Do you have some thoughts on the language, the alternative proposed language or the proposed language?
Yeah, I don't know if I have really too much to add with, I think a lot of it, the best reasonably available records by electronic message. I know we spoke about that we had our last meeting, but yeah, I don't really know if there's anything more or less I would take from it. I think it's fair. I don't want to have our locators be bogged down with design. I don't really deal too much with design locates. I know some of the larger contractors do. I can see how these would be a real pain just because of the volume and some of these projects may or may not change. So
Okay. I was trying to figure out what we had discussed in the meeting. It was the OR. Yep. And C in the first proposed. Yep. So, okay.
Yes, the placement of the word or.
Yep.
But then we had a conversation about locatable and unlocatable that became a whole nother problem that Scott has thoughts on, but has not shared with us yet. Please, Scott.
Well, I have my hand up. I
Now
don't
I
want to
see
be
it.
too weird about that. I just want to, and I don't have a strong opinion on this, but the words unlocatable in this document do drive the direction of what you're trying to do. So A talks about that you have to mark your locatable facilities. B talks about unlocatable facilities and what your options are there. So as you wordsmith, that's what I was trying to point out. So if your options are going to be, you get to paint or provide best description or provide maps or provide contact, I think the word unlocatable in there, it creates some confusing direction. And again, it's direction that I had received from experience with Kevin. Is Kevin on the call today?
Nope. Okay, so I think what I'm hearing is the meshing of proposed language and alternative proposed language. Take your pens out. Go to sub A. Mark within 24 inches the outside lateral dimensions of both sides of all its locatable. Strike locatable. underground facilities. Going to sub B, provide the excavator the best description available to the operator of the strike unlocatable underground facilities in the area. And the addition of C, as well as the placement of the ORs that you now see in red on your screen. Does that get us where we need to be? There's an OR at the beginning of, at A.
Jamie's up.
Jamie.
So I think that B could be, you could include C into B then, because if we're striking locatable and unlocatable, B feels like it's the home for providing copies of best reasonably available records by electronic message, etc. Because then we're just basically saying you can provide the best description available, and part of providing that best description available includes providing those documents. So I feel like B could absorb C if we're striking unlocatable, striking locatable from A.
We needed that, all that delineation of format. And I know I asked you this same question last time we met, Josh, and now you have to remind me again. We had a reason why we needed it, that language, the electronic message.
You are ringing a bell, but I.
Something related to
Should I
enforcement.
help?
And I'm not suggesting we get rid of the electronic message. I'm saying add it to B.
Right,
Where I completely hear you. Now we're coming full circle because that was what my initial recommendation was, is change that and then what Jamie is mentioning. But what you're saying here for providing the copies is that the point of us changing this was to facilitate or add an option. So Washington has the design locate requests, but they had the design information requests. So we want to model our request for survey designs to reduce how many that are being called in that need to be marked. We're wanting to use that, and I don't know about enforcement end of it. You said enforcement, I'm not referring to enforcement. I'm just saying how they call it in, how they get the information, because a lot of engineers don't need marks, they just need the facility.
They just need records, right.
So
That's why we
have
called it as a third option. Okay. Andy, you have thoughts now.
I remembered something. I remembered that we were also talking about a positive response notification on that as well. We were going to include that, I think, in C, I believe.
What do you mean positive response, Andy? I'm slow on this one.
I think there was some discussion about the acceptable notifications must include a callback or a positive response. We were talking about including that, for the ticket, having a positive response that.
Requiring positive response?
Well, so with that, and I hear you.
Isn't it already?
It's voluntary.
Okay.
So I see where you're going with that, but I think we're trying to now put, and now going back to that conversation, now, I don't think we need it. And here's why, because we're just putting in here a facility of what we can do as locators out there, facility operators, what we can do. We needed to add that piece in so that we can follow, instead of putting in rule here, what we're going to be doing. So that right there gives us, you need to do this. Well, that all can be operational in terms of how or whatever we design that to be. And so we've done presentations on the DIR and the DLR from Washington, that process before. That captures that there, I think. And if not, we add it there, not here, from a positive response end, or just the response. Yeah, I got it. Here you go. Here's the information in the records.
Scott, you got thoughts?
I just want to caution or ask if the intention of this is to not require any type of marking ever. Washington has the DIR, DLR, which is an escalation plan, which will first give you information, and then if after you wait 5 days, if you still need marking, then you can escalate that to a DLR, a design locate request. By putting or, you remove the requirement for any operator to ever have to put marks down. So I just wanted to note that.
But this is specific to a design locate,
Yeah, so
not
if
to an excavation.
correct. So for design locate, currently you have to mark if you have locatable facilities within 10 business days. So this says you can either mark or provide information or, whatever the other one is. And so if you, by
Well,
saying,
right,
so you remove that requirement, which I imagine is if
The
most
intent.
operators are going to remove, won't respond with paint. So that's the shakeup. I was kind of venting a little, or expressing the concern of the design folks, the surveyors that they might come up with.
well, when we get to a hearing, they will have an opportunity to be heard. I understand it, but I also understand, I can't tell you how many times we get, Washington County wants to replace all of Cornelius Pass Road. I mean, I've got a highway's worth of facilities along that pathway. It would take an entire locate team 10 days to go out there and locate everything that's out there. It's ridiculous to me. So if I can give them a record and that meets their needs for their design, I've now saved the cost of the ticket, and bonus, I've given the county an updated record of my facilities, which they always want anyway. So, I understand where there might be some concern, but I think the net on this is it's gonna save a lot of money and a lot of headache for folks. So, now that I've heard some additional considerations, I'm going to read B as I think it is now being proposed. Provide the excavator the best description available to the operator of the underground facilities in the area of the proposed excavation, including as constructed drawings or other facility maps that are maintained by the facility operator, by providing copies of the best reasonably available records by electronic message, mail, facsimile, or other delivery method. And now that I read that, I actually think striking providing copies of the best reasonably available records is unnecessary. So I'll read it again. Provide the excavator the best description available. That reads weird.
It does.
Provide the excavator the best description available to the operator. I think to the operator of the, that just feels weird. Feels
does.
wordy.
Very.
Okay, hold on. I gotta have a moment here to grammar this correctly. I don't think the description available to the operator. I think,
It's to the operator of.
but I'm thinking
Why do you
Why
need
do-
best description available?
why do you need to the operator of? The best description of the underground facilities. Not just what's available to the operator, because, I mean, you assume that that's, but that's not operative. I have to step away. All right, Connor. So, provide the excavator the best description available of the underground facilities in the area of the proposed excavation. Can I strike to the operator?
Yeah,
Sure.
I think so.
I think that reads better.
The operator is implying that they don't use bad information, or they're not just like, it gives the best information that the operator has available to provide. The most recent updated maps, not something from 1920, I think is, unless that's the best they have available. That's the language intent.
Right, we're retaining the best available, it's the to the operator, best available to the operator. I don't think to the operator is necessary.
It's redundant because if you look at parens 1 up above, it says the operator
They're
must.
right.
So you're saying the operator must and the operator is in B.
Right, right, it's, yes,
Cool.
thank you, okay. Provide the excavator the best available, the best description available of the underground facilities in the area of the proposed excavation, including as constructed drawings or other facility maps that are maintained by the facility operator by electronic message, mail, facsimile, or other delivery method. What do we think? You love it so much, I'll entertain a motion to recommend this change to the board.
Why do we have facts in there?
Because people still use it.
Yeah.
And we can't get rid of it because it is still a part of state statute and rule. I would love for it to go away, but people still have them.
Well, I understand that.
I make a
Telegraph.
motion to move the language to recommendation.
Thank you. We have a motion for this recommended language to be presented to the board for consideration. Is there a second?
I'll second.
I think that was Lee. Excellent. Motion and second to move the language as read in 0080. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, please state the same. Hearing none, motion carries. Now we're on to new business. This item, first item, I don't have anything from Kyle on this matter. We've asked for it twice. We're gonna go ahead and remove this item from our work log. If someone else wants to bring it back at a later date, we will certainly consider it. Melanie, we're tabling your item, is that correct? Okay, item B is tabled. Moving right along, item C, Ms. Lemke. We have a consideration from you for reducing the 45-day ticket life. The current language reads, ticket life means 45 calendar days, period, 45 calendar day period after an excavator provides notice to the Oregon Utility Notification Center under OAR 952.001.0050 sub 1, and the center opens a ticket for a locate request based on this notice. The proposed language would remove that 45 and change it to 28.
There was conversation around what the best duration is and how 45 days, you know, is longer than is recommended as far as like having it stay valid that long. And I think it was Kevin brought up best practice around this. Do you know if that was ever, if there was anything else additional after the board meeting that came in?
We did not receive any updates from the Common Ground Alliance best practices that Kevin was going to be researching.
Okay.
So
I think it's really just up for consideration if the board feels that we should be changing that time frame or leaving it as is. It was part of that American Gas Association white paper that 28 calendar days was the longest duration that they felt was sufficient.
So just to let everyone know, the Washington's 45, we're 45, Montana's 30. And if we don't count the weekends, Idaho is 15. So,
Utah is 12. They're changing that, I think.
okay.
making it longer.
I have no objections to it.
Yes.
Okay, so what's the, I mean, the reason for a ticket life to be, is the expected period that we expect an excavation to take place, right? I want to get this down to a real fundamental level. How long does paint last on the ground? I'm telling you, it doesn't last 45 days because I had locates done less than 45 days ago,
Right.
and they're gone.
Right,
Well,
and that's a big part of the concern is if the locates are no longer visible 45 days, why do we let it last
So
45 days?
why isn't the contractor keeping the marks up? Like,
that's in rule, they're required to do that.
right,
So we'd have to recall the ticket to have new paint put down on the ground. Because the paint has to be put down by, I mean, so that's repaying for the same locate. So
Remarks do get called in regularly by excavators, if they've washed away. They're supposed to maintain them, but, you know, what I think this does, this 28 calendar day, bringing it from 45, there is some claims. There's a claims piece to this, that if something happens after the 45 days and they don't have a locate, then, you know, then they're responsible for that. There's also, although this is revenue for the call center, it isn't, we're paying more from a utility.
Right.
We're paying more in locates a year, the tariff. Especially if we're contracting, we're paying the contractor for that. So I'm just pointing out some of the.
so what would, in the claims aspect, what would be the difference between 45 and 28?
it would be very beneficial for the claims aspect for it to be 28 instead of 45, because that means that the duration of the project is shorter. And a lot of excavators will either, they don't call in refreshes, they just continue to keep digging. And if something happens after, on the 29th day, and they don't have a ticket generated to refresh that, then they're going to eat it.
Right.
It's their responsibility, whether the marks are inaccurate or not.
So, but it's the same thing with 45. It's the same thing with 14, so.
Right. Scott, you have a comment here?
It's
Yeah, I just pulled up the CGA best practice. It recommends 10 to 20 days and cites that several states, to include Kansas, Ohio, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Texas, have laws. And then 15 days, Virginia and Tennessee.
So wasn't this just changed? Why did we change it to 45?
because it was the life of the project before, and that was a year, 2 years. They can maintain marks for that duration. So it was in the favor of the excavator, but at the same time, it wasn't helping damage prevention. So in order to prevent damages, this is why we moved it to 45, and obviously why we're trying to get it to 28. Because her marks were gone.
I did reach out to Don Evans and asked him if there's been any talk of changing it up there, and he said no, they're at 45, but they'll be following us closely. So that was something that came up last meeting.
So we have a proposal. This is very straightforward. We don't need to wordsmith it. What do we want to do? I would love to hear from Connor. Perfect. Good timing, Connor.
That was about perfect. So I had a lot of interesting conversation with some people in the industry regarding this. The specific day, though, I don't really have, I know the recommendation, the 10 to 20. I couldn't, a lot of people were either very adamant of it not changing, and some of them actually agreed that by lowering it, it would prevent more damages. So to me personally, I feel like it would be a benefit to, a 45 is pretty long, unless you're in a really big project. But by 45 days, 2 weeks in, you're struggling to find locates. And with our weather, even if you're maintaining locates, it's still hard. So I don't really have any issue personally with lowering it. But I can't tell you exactly what day I would agree, whether it's 10, 12, 15, or 20, but I definitely feel like 45 is too long. And those large projects, if we were to reduce it, we'd have more call-ins, but I feel like the damages would inevitably go down. So that's kind of my 2 cents on it. And we call in a lot of locates, especially for our industry, but I don't see any major drawback. I know Micah said something about more claims, but I think it would just be a pretty easy change, and hopefully we'd see a reduction in damages. So that's my 2 cents on that.
If they get marked. So that's going to increase tickets.
Right.
We're already having issues with tickets being met.
Yeah, see, that was one of the concerns that a lot of people brought up. Some of the people I spoke with was, are we going to put too much on locators? Is that going to be, we're struggling already. Are we going to be able to meet that demand? If we're able to, then I think that would be a great idea.
Well, we're doing a couple of things that are pretty earth-shattering in this next wave of rulemaking, right? We're changing the definition of large area. We're providing alternatives for design locates. We're doing things that, in concert with this change, we're doing things that are going to mitigate the number of tickets down. So balancing that against shortening the duration of a ticket life. Andy.
Still on mute.
Oh, sorry. What was the reason for 28 days? It seems like 30 days would be easy to remember, for somebody working out, a homeowner or, somebody working out in the field. And then I really don't have anything against it. I think having fresh paint on the ground is great. And it may force some, it may force some agencies to have to kind of tighten their timelines on projects as far as, planning around what infrastructure is there if they're doing some kind of an installation. But yeah, I think I would definitely not be opposed to it.
Jamie.
So a couple items. There was no exact science behind 28 days. Basically, the AGA white paper had the states broken out into 3 different categories. It was states that were 14 or 15 calendar days, states that were 20 to 21, and states that were 28. So, I mean, I guess my intention when I put in 28 was it's maybe the least painful option to transition from 45 to 28. But to your point, maybe 30 makes sense because it is, easy to remember. But then as far as the increase in demand, Melanie, your comment, I think, yes, there is a concern there, but as far as like this being a damage prevention component, if they're working with a quote unquote valid ticket up to 45 days, that ticket really is offering them no value if the marks have washed away, and they should be requesting a new one anyways at that point. So I wouldn't want to have the increase in demand deter us from moving forward with something that's going to, positively impact damage prevention.
So let me think about this in operators terms. When we have a relocate, we get charged the same amount from our locating facilities, right? The difference is we don't get the cost from One Call Concepts that goes along with that.
Correct.
Okay, so this is driving revenue into the call center.
Well, wait a second. So a recall, that means they're calling it a refresh.
Right.
Of the same ticket, but they have a new ticket number. If they have a new ticket number, then we're gonna get billed for that tariff. Unless something's changed.
No, but we're also having difficulty with operational costs. I mean, like, this is, it is what should happen.
Right.
Should the whole system benefit or just the contract locate? And I think that's the decision we're weighing with also damage prevention, right?
I think so.
So I've heard 28, I've heard 30, and I've heard 45. We're at 45 today. If we're changing, we've got choices between 28 and 30. So I need a decision from someone that is not me.
My guess is the 28 was just 4 weeks.
4 weeks,
Yeah,
right, yes. Yeah. From the date that you call in versus 30 days, which then you gotta do some calculation.
And would it be easier to say it as 4 calendar weeks versus 28 calendar days? Because it's easier to count 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks versus trying to figure out how many 28 is.
I'd rather just 2 days. But I personally don't think it needs to be changed.
Okay. So does somebody want to make a motion so we can have some discussion and move this issue forward? Or not?
I'll make a motion to move it to 30 calendar days. 30 calendar days. That meets us in the middle from 45, 28, somewhere in the middle.
Okay, there's a motion to change the ticket life to mean 30 calendar days. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
I second, yeah.
Thank you. Motion and second. Is there any discussion? Melanie, you don't believe we need to change this? I'd like to hear from you.
I don't, I feel like it's fine the way it is, honestly, because they should, if they need a remark, they'll call in a remark. It's the contractor's responsibility to maintain their line, so I just don't feel like it should be. I guess I just don't have a really big opinion on it, just the fact that I just don't.
I can change it. I can.
Okay.
So, going back to the claims, you know.
Louder.
So going back to the claims part of it, and that is from the business side. If I was your locator, I would advocate for that, and we'd hope that you back us up on that end of it, just because the ticket will expire in 30 days instead of 45 days. There's a lot of excavators out there that do not refresh their marks and do not call in remarks, and they'll keep digging. And once they keep digging, if they keep digging past that point of the 45 days, or if we're moving it to 30, now we're bringing it to 30. Then if they hit something and we marked it wrong, or we didn't mark it, we're not liable. They are, because now they're outside of that.
Absolutely,
So
I understand that.
that's a benefit. That's a huge benefit, because the cost and damages, you know, are.
But what's the
exponential.
difference between 30 days and 31 days and 32 days? You know, whatever it may be, it could be any day.
15
And-
days. from
Okay,
what I-
What's the average duration of most excavation projects?
I have no idea.
Connor, what's the average duration of most of your excavation projects for utilities?
It can be months, weeks, quarters. They're kind of all over the place, but an average, I mean, definitely gonna be more than 45 days.
I think if you're gonna use the term, most excavations are gonna be less than a week. Most utility service installations, most of those things are gonna be very short projects. I'd actually describe these longer projects as the exception.
You don't have that data in front of you, Scott, for us? Homeowners?
Some of the four screens I have open right now, I don't have that one up yet.
Okay, is there any other discussion on this motion? Again, I want to remind the committee we're considering reducing ticket life from 45 days to 30 calendar days. Hearing none, I'll bring the discussion to a close. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Hi.
Aye.
Any opposed, please state the same.
Aye.
I have no idea how many ayes, but one nay for the record. Motion passes. So we'll bring this to the board for consideration. 16 minutes. All right, let's see if we can get one more of these done. Definition of non-invasive tools, and this is found at 952001010. This is adding to that definition the following words: including the use of hand tools, air cutting, vacuum excavation, or hydro vacuum excavation.
We have to define sorry.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
We would have to define hand tools, I would assume. I mean, vacuum excavation or hydrovac excavation, that's pretty clear. Hand tools, we just, you know, a bar tool, you know, bar holing.
A shovel, a crowbar, a
Right.
hammer,
Yeah, right, but I don't think.
screwdriver.
I don't think a bar hole, you know, I don't think that's safe. You know, damages happen all the time with those things, so. I don't even understand how that's even passed in Washington and legislated as a statute that you can bar hole down to 20 inches. I don't, that's crazy to me. I'm just speaking out loud, or thinking out loud, but.
Go ahead, Jamie. Give us some understanding of this recommendation.
Right, and this conversation came up quite a bit at CGA, was around the use of shovels and how shovels cause a significant number of damages for a lot of utilities. So I agree that hand tools is a little too broad. This verbiage came from another state's definition, so of course we can expand upon it. I mean, it could be something like soft digging methods, something around that, but I agree, hand tools does actually create its own issue.
Okay, so what if we just struck the word hand tools, the use of air cutting, vacuum excavation, or hydro vacuum excavation?
Then we get into the complication of how is a homeowner going to expose the facility, and what their capabilities are, and understanding of how to do that.
In a back truck.
Get their shop back out.
Yeah.
Just about to say that.
Mini back truck.
Yeah, from an excavator standpoint, a hand tool, a shovel is 90% of the way that if you're not using a vac truck or hydrovaxing, a shovel is going to be probably your next step. I agree, though, not using a digging bar, because that's the quickest way to find a utility and also damage it. But
What if we take tools out of the equation and put hand digging?
Like by hand?
Yeah, like a dog does. No, but you know what I'm saying, like.
I did that yesterday.
Well, because it's a term, so, years ago, that's something we used to put on the ground for fiber optics, in high pressure. Not high pressure per se, but fiber optics is hand dig. Or if there was a trouble spot, it would say hand dig, so you'd write in with the paint on the ground, caution, hand dig this spot, don't excavate around it, the marks could be inaccurate. Whether they're, they used sequentials to mark it, or they didn't, they
What
used what you wrote.
constitutes hand digging though?
But then
Your hand in the dirt. But yes, you probably ought to define such things.
and I'm looking, we don't have anything.
I'm looking through your definitions now.
Looking at the AJA paper, Indiana says hand excavation, Virginia says hand digging.
It's industry known.
Mm-hmm.
Hand dug test holes. That's what they refer to it as in New York.
Non-mechanized equipment. I mean,
Well, in the statutory definition, we begin with the definition of excavation, which is any movement of earth, rock, or other material on or below ground. So then moving down into the rule, I'm sorry, you're gonna go through like the full spectrum of my thought process here now. Moving down into definitions, this is specific for providing exemption for non-invasive tools. I think we can all agree that hand tools are an invasive methodology, right? Because you're sort of blindly striking things below the surface without any semblance of what's going on. Whereas vacuuming, the worst thing you're gonna do is suck it up.
right, but not everyone has the option, so I know that Connor can speak to this.
Yes. A vac truck's around $500,000, so most smaller companies are definitely, if you weren't able to use hand tools and had a vac X, and that would definitely be a big change to excavation and excavators.
I would also remind the group that you can absolutely damage a facility with a hydrovac and using pressure wands. Those are lots of damage there.
You mean excavating with your power washer? That's not something I do. I've done that before. It worked really well. They make these neat little things that go on the end of your garden hose too, that kind of creates a pressure washer to go and tunnel underneath sidewalks.
I would advocate for hand digging. If we found it in other statutes and other laws, I would say that would suffice. It takes the tool aspect and the tool question around tools out of the equation, and it's just hand digging. And then you can expand on that and say, okay, well, what is that? And I think that's pretty clear.
So lose the air cutting, vacuum excavation?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, just tools.
Hand
instead of
digging.
tools.
Hand digging instead of tools.
We
Is
still
this
have.
probably better answered as an FAQ?
No, those are getting gone. We're getting.
Yeah. Thanks for that.
Well, it was one of the, I don't know if it's an old business or,
It's not on any work log right now, but apparently we just added it. It's getting rid of the FAQs. I'll add that to my task list. Thank you, Micah, for that
That's
recommendation.
already on a separate project, but
It's a standards manual
Yep.
update, right? So
Yep.
you want to
it's
just,
part of that.
oh, thank God.
It's
That's
already
your
rolled into
problem.
I think
That's
that's,
all
okay.
And we're modeling after Texas. Texas is kind of the gold standard from what we've seen.
So where does non-invasive appear in the rule? Employ hand tools or other non-invasive, okay, so I'm at 952.001.0090, sub 3C is where we see the word non-invasive. Employ hand tools or other non-invasive methods either to determine the exact location of the underground facility or down 24 inches beyond the depth of the intended excavation within 24 inches of the outside dimensions of a marked underground facility. We also see it in the FAQs. So the only time this definition is used is in the rule talking about delay of excavation until response from a facility operator, duty of excavator to use reasonable care, and damage to facilities. And we already used, hand tools is already called out there. So hand digging would be new, but that's sort of captured in the non-invasive methods. So changing this definition to allow for hand digging, I think is net add. You still have to deal with the fact that hand tools appears, if you don't want hand tools to be used, still appears in that rule.
Why don't we just strike hand tools?
Just one comment is, you know, a lot of times when you're excavating around something and you get close, I know like my crew, they'll use like little garden shovels to kind of pick away to find it. And that would be considered a hand tool, and they're not, you know, jam it in the ground anywhere or anything. They're just kind of trying to peel layers of soil off so they can discover where that facility is. So they are using a tool, but it's, you know, kind of lightly. I don't know if we want to remove the tool part. I don't know how you would access that, you know, just using your fingers. It'd be pretty difficult.
Andy, tell me what you're thinking.
Jim.
I see Andy first.
That was you.
Yeah, I just was gonna mention a couple of things. The tools part for hand tools. I know my guys sometimes they'll get close to a facility and use, you know, like a small little single-handed garden shovel to just kind of pick away at the layers of soil to kind of expose that facility. So, you know, they are using a tool, but it's lightly, you know. So I don't know if it's necessary to take the tool part out of it. I mean, I don't know how you would do that, you know, with your fingernails or just by hand. So.
All right, Jim.
Agree with Andy there. To take tools out of the equation and go to straight hands is probably unrealistic, depending upon where you're at. If you're in Lake Oswego and a bunch of rock, you're going to need a shovel of some kind. In an effort to reduce damages, if you, rather than try and take hand tools out of that, and Connor's right too. I mean, if you go to just vac systems, whether it's air or hydro excavating, that's probably unrealistic too, to think every homeowner and certainly every excavator is going to go out and get a vac system.
Well,
But
I want to point out that we keep coming back to this point in the rule itself, where the definition non-invasive appears, hand tools is called out before other non-invasive methods. So hand tools is already assumed to be allowed by the rule. Now we're dealing with the definition of those other non-invasive methods. So hand digging is another form of non-invasive method that doesn't involve a hand tool, as
Perfect.
is cutting, vacuum excavation, or hydro vacuum excavation.
how about if you put how about if you actually add something into the law that says the use of non-invasive methods of digging, such as hand tools, does not release you from liability of damage. They might, the excavator, the homeowner, whoever you're talking to, start digging a little safer and ultimately reduce damages, which is kind of the goal, I think. And then along with reducing those damages, it takes claims out of the equation a little bit, that type of thing, or it makes it very clear in a claim situation. Someone can't argue, hey, listen, all I was using was my shovel. Well, you're correct, and you're allowed to use your shovel, but it doesn't mean you're not liable if you damage that utility if it was marked correctly.
Jim, I appreciate you giving us this insight. I want to remind the participants of the process that gets us to where we are today. That the requirement within our policy and procedure manual is that the board render an item to the committee for consideration and recommendation back to the board. So I'll be your suggestion, Jim. It really needs to come to a board meeting as something that you think should be considered. And then the board would need to refer that to committee for us to work on that language. But I love your thoughts there and thank you for the suggestion.
You got it. Thank you.
Scott.
I put in chat the CGA best practice language on this just for consideration. It talks about quite a bit of recommendations here.
Okay, great language. Thank you for suggesting or providing that suggestion to us. I'm gonna go back. We're just down to the last couple minutes of this committee meeting, so I wanna see if we can't get this one definition dispensed of, and then we can see where we maybe can tie in some of that CGA language elsewhere. The language being read as follows: non-invasive methods means a practice to expose an underground facility that does not damage any part of the facility, including the use of hand digging, air cutting, vacuum excavation, or hydro vacuum excavation. Is there a motion to recommend this language to the board?
I'll make a motion to recommend that language to the board.
Thank you, Jamie. Is there a second?
I'll second.
So excitable. Was that Dale? Thank you. Motion and second to make changes to the definition of non-invasive methods to include hand digging, air cutting, vacuum excavation, or hydro vacuum excavation. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please state the same. Hearing none, motion casts. Okay, look at that. We got through quite a few things today. Thank you everyone for your time and attention. Preview for our next committee meeting, which I have yet to figure out when we're gonna schedule that, but we will get it scheduled. We will begin at E. So if you do nothing else, take your paper that you have printed out, draw a line at E, and look at everything past it. That's what we're gonna talk about next time. Thank you. It's been fun.
I move we adjourn.
We don't even need to
You
do
don't
that.
even need that?
Okay, so we have in the
Are we
policy and procedures.
offline?
Do we